Hello, my name is Meredith Gregory, and I'm the Director of School and Teacher Programs at the Norton Museum of Art. We are so excited to be part of the School District of Palm Beach County's preschool for the 2021-2022 school year. This video includes an overview of the upcoming Mexican Modernism exhibition at the Norton Museum of Art, a close look at a self-portrait by Frida Kahlo, a related art activity led by Veronica Hatch, who's the School and Teacher Program Coordinator, and time for a final reflection. This session will help you become more familiar with Frida Kahlo and Mexican modernism, learn how the Norton can be a resource to you as you explore Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, and other artists of this era, and enhance your ideas of how to explore the themes of identity, cultural heritage, and portraiture in your art classroom. So let's get started. So first, I'd like to give you a little sneak peek of the upcoming exhibition, Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, and Mexican Modernism, the Jacques and Natasha Gelman collection, which will be on view from October 23rd through February 6th. This will be the Norton's first large-scale exhibition devoted to Latin American art, and also the largest grouping of Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera's artwork. So a lot of first, super exciting. And there's going to be over 150 paintings, works of art on paper, photographs, and textiles. So after a bloody 10-year Mexican Revolution that ended in 1920, there was a cultural renaissance in Mexico as artists and activists looked to history and culture of the Mexican people to forge a new political and visual identity. Jacques Gelman, who was a film producer, and his wife were collectors, as well as friends of many of these artists who were part of this Renaissance. You can see this through the many portraits that were created of them by the Mexican modernists, such as Frida Kahlo did a portrait of Natasha Gelman on the left, and Luther Gurzo did a portrait of Jacques Gelman here on the right. They collected works of art by artists such as Rufino Tamayo, Lola Alvarez Bravo, and of course, Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, who were on the forefront of this effort to create a new identity. I wanted to highlight these two artists because this shows you the breadth of work in this exhibition of the different types of mediums, but also the different types of artists that you can use if you want to go beyond Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo. Here's some of the works that you will see by Diego Rivera in the exhibition. The exhibition really does show that connection of how Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, and other artists at the time were dealing with modernism and exploring themes such as surrealism, nature, home, and family. Here's some of the works that are featured in Frida Kahlo. One thing I find fascinating about this exhibition is the portion that will discuss how Frida Kahlo created her visual identity. And she really thought her visual identity of not just for herself, but for what she called the Mexican every woman. And this section of the exhibition will feature clothing, which I also think will be really appealing to students who visit. And again, make some really great cultural connections to the Mexican heritage. Okay, so we're going to do a quick inquiry-based lesson to investigate a self-portrait by Frida Kahlo. To get a refresher on how to use inquiry in the classroom, you can visit the norton.org YouTube page. In this close look at a work of art, you can follow along and write responses if you'd like. And to conduct a similar lesson in your classroom, have students write, discuss in one large group, or you can break them up into smaller groups, or a combination of all three. This video is really for you, but we hope that you can be inspired by this video to adjust our questions and information to meet the needs of your students, because we do think it's really worthwhile to take an in-depth look at a work of art using the inquiry-based teaching techniques before creating art in your classroom. So first, we're going to see. Take your time to just look for a full 30 seconds. Challenge yourself to keep your eyes on the work of art for that entire time. Notice how your eyes move across the canvas. And if you think you've seen everything, challenge yourself to see something new. Write down with a pencil, piece of paper, what is your eye drawn to first? What other details do you notice? You can stop this video if you need more time to write down your responses. What do the elements of art, such as line, shape, color, texture, space, how do these really make your eyes move around the work of art? And how do these elements of art contribute to the overall feeling of the work of art? Now, I really want to think about the environment. What's the mood? And where might this be? Now, let's take some time to think. Focus on the person in this work of art that we know, because it's called self-portrait, is Frida Kahlo. Take time to jot down 2 to 3 words that you think best describe this person. What do you notice about the way they dress? Again, if you need to take another moment to write, you can pause the video at any time. Are there any hints as to when this work of art might have been painted? I'm also super interested in the monkeys in this work of art and how they relate to Frida Kahlo. So, how do the monkeys in person seem to interact with each other? And thinking about the artist and arranged with the monkey and also the plants, what's the story she might be trying to tell? And how does she use all of these elements and how they're arranged to tell this story? And lastly, let's wonder, what's familiar to you about this work of art? What seems strange? What's intriguing to you? Anything else you wonder about? I hope you really enjoyed taking a closer look at this work of art and that you enjoyed writing down your responses. I find that anytime I do a close looking investigation of this specific work and works in general, I always find something new. Just amazing. Like, for example, I've never noticed before the detail of her skin, the folds underneath her neck, the creases, or the freckles on her arm. So I just think it's really amazing what this sort of activity can unfold. So a little more about this work of art. After the Mexican Revolution, which ended in 1920, Mexican modernists worked to forge a new national and personal identity. Artists adopted the term Mexicanidad, which mixed national and cultural heritage to form an identity. For many years, starting in the 1800s, indigenous people lost control of their lands. In the 1930s, the government reinstated an ancient system called ejido, which allowed people from the community to farm on government land. And people saw this as a really positive thing because it gave land to many instead of just a few, those privileges. In Self Portrait with Monkeys, Frida Kahlo surrounds herself with plants that you might see in Mexico, highlighting her own connection to the land. Notice how Kahlo barely leaves any open space and the background looks flattened. Kahlo places herself in the center with a confident gaze directed toward the viewer. Her specific self portrait style is inspired by a Spanish religious painting called Ex Voto. Kahlo also pays homage, and there's the vocabulary word along with the 2 others that we've discussed today. Kahlo also pays homage to nature in Mexico's pre Hispanic era through the depiction of monkeys. Frida Kahlo actually had monkeys as pets, but she often uses monkeys in her own work as reference to ancient Mexican art. Many of her fellow Mexican modern artists also look back to indigenous cultures for inspiration. So this is a picture of an Aztec monkey found in Mexico City called Spider Monkey with wind god regalia from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So again, these are the type of indigenous cultures and artworks that Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, and other Mexican modernists would have been inspired by. Frida Kahlo also used her clothing to convey her cultural heritage. Her father was German and her mother was Spanish from the indigenous tribe Tijuana in Oaxaca, Mexico. She often mixed things like Spanish jewelry, Chanel clothing from Europe with hoopil blouses, like we see in Self Portrait with Monkeys, inspired by pre Hispanic cultures. So here's an example of how she might have mixed all of those different types of identities through clothing all together. In this work of art, she is not only wearing the hupil, but she's showing a hupil with the term Olin, which was an Aztec word for earthquake or perpetual movement. I love that she kind of paints this in a reddish, orangish color and also has the lips that match that color so that we're automatically drawn to this symbol on her chest. You can see a close-up version of this here, and in fact, a monkey's even touching the symbol, which I think is really interesting. The symbol Olin, which again means earthquake or perpetual movement, may even relate to Kahlo's personal life or her political views. So again, here's the vocabulary list of some of the words that we talked about. Veronica will also highlight some of these vocabulary words in her lesson, and you'll also have a chance to uh, look at this lesson on a PDF of Veronica's lesson, so you can take these vocabulary words with you and utilize them in your classroom as you talk about Mexican modernist art. I hope this was a fun opportunity to take some time to stop and look closely at a work of art and hopefully just relaxing for you as well. Next, Veronica Hatch will feature an art activity that illustrates how to incorporate these Mexican modernist and Kahlo themes into your own art education practices.
My name is Veronica Hatch, and I'm the School and Teacher Programs Coordinator here at the Norton. Welcome to Preschool Teachers. Virtually at the museum, we're hoping to host teacher professional development workshops in person soon, but for now, we're bringing you this lesson online. This is an art-making video lesson to complement the overview of the upcoming Mexican Modernism exhibition led by my colleague Mary Gregory. The exhibition is called Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, and Mexican Modernism from the Jacques and Natasha Gelman collection, which will be on view starting October 23rd, 2021. We hope you can implement this art lesson into your classroom, and you might adapt depending on your student's grade level and any curriculum standards you might be introducing or reviewing over the upcoming school year. Our goal is to provide an avenue for exploration and introduction to the themes of symbolism and artist cultural heritage, specifically related to Mexican modernism and artist Frida Kahlo. Let's explore one of the many ways you can incorporate an art lesson into your classroom based on the themes of identity, cultural heritage, and portraiture, and also how symbolism can take us to discover your students' own identity, learn about themselves and others, and explore the artist's life. Let's begin. I am going to be taking you through the lesson with a PowerPoint presentation today. On this presentation, you'll be able to review the introduction of the lesson. We'll go over key ideas and themes. I'll take you through a step-by-step lesson of the art making portion, review quickly the vocabulary. But you can also, at the end of the lesson, access a PDF format template where you'll be able to acquire the entire lesson for your review and your implementation in the classroom. We're going to be basing the lesson on a portrait by artist Frida Kahlo, who is a Mexican artist born in 1907 in Coyoacán, Mexico. This is a self-portrait with monkeys made in 1943, and it's an oil canvas belonging to the Jacques and Natasha Gelman collection. Hopefully, by this time, your students had had the time to review the See, Think, Wonder model and looked at the presentation by Meredith. So they'll be able to review the main ideas and key themes of the lesson. For the art portion, the main ideas are to think about how symbolism in painting can reflect personal experiences and connections, explore artists' cultural background, in this particular case, Mexican culture and geography, and create a self-portrait highlighting students' own unique identity. The objectives of the lesson, we're hoping for students to learn about how artists use symbolism and how it relates to the personal experience and cultural background. Explore symbols to share their personal narrative. And explore the properties of oil pastels, considering the colors, the layering techniques to create a self-portrait. We're going to begin by just quickly overviewing the introduction of the lesson. And we have to think about how artists use symbols and portraiture as a tool of a new way of looking at identity and cultural heritage. Different objects, animals, food, hobbies can take on a whole new meaning when added to one's personal narrative. Objects become part of the main subject. Artist Frida Kahlo chose these animals and objects in particular on her self-portrait to add the meaning of her life in Mexico and the things that surround her, like the fruits, animals, and fauna, fondly and deeply rooted to the Mexican culture. We can begin the lesson by asking your students, what objects will you include that reflect who you are or something important about your life? What do those animals, food, and objects that you choose mean to you? You may stop there and ask students to reflect before you begin the art making. There's three main things that surround the first portion of the art making. And we think that by reviewing the theme, the actual objects, and then the meaning behind it, it's a great way to start asking them to think about not only what the meaning behind is, but also to start thinking about the composition of their self-portrait. What are the symbols and objects that can share a personal narrative? Find objects around you by doing a research, right, about what special meaning they carry. It could be either personal, cultural, social, or religious. Ask them to think about the material qualities, color, texture, and objects as it relates to the elements of art and principles of design, depending on the grade level. And then you head right into the meaning and what are these objects? How can these objects go beyond and adapt to their own meaning as they symbolize something different for everyone? So what are the materials? We always think about the resources you have in the classroom. So we chose just a few materials, hopefully easily accessible in your classroom. We're going to use a black or dark color cardboard, a ruler, pencil, and an eraser, oil pastels, and white pencil. Also think about the levels of your classroom and what other materials you might be able to incorporate, like adding collage or maybe using different pastels, chalk, depending on their level and the advancement on their classroom. So we're going to begin with discussion points. You want to always be able to go back to review the lesson and what is really identity and the key facts about the particular self-portrait with monkeys created by Frida Kahlo. So always go back to the identity and her homeland of Mexico and how she grew up. How important Mexican heritage was for her and one of the most important parts of not only her life, but as a woman and as an artist growing up at that time in particular period in Mexico. She also challenged the times and what a woman wore at the time. Think about the customs and what we wear. Some of those details are very important to her own identity. She wore traditional Mexican clothing, which women of modern women were not doing at the time. And she also wore very long and colorful dresses and skirts and pantsuits very often that were not common at that time. She also based a lot of her portraits in things and objects, not only her still lifes, but her self portraits and things that were important to her. These monkeys hold a very special meaning as it was not only something that represented her identity, but she kept them as pets in her home and the blue home in Cuayacan. Also thinking about the surrounding and the things and the smells that she grew up with, those tropical leaves behind her portrait represent the beautiful fauna that was found in Mexico. And then the colors that in Mexico that represent those brilliant oranges and blues from the flower. You can also begin a discussion point here. What does the word identity mean to you? Or what is one special thing about you that makes you unique? For grades, upper grades 6 to 12, you can dig in a little deeper into Mexican Revolution and the importance of the indigenous people and her research on pre-Hispanic people and the foundations, which are the foundations of mostly all political and populist Mexican art. Monkeys also hold a very symbolic meaning in pre-Columbian and past societies, and things that also relate to the things that Frida Kahlo was thinking. In Aztec culture, monkeys had an important presence. So that could be also a portion where you might ask upper grade levels to research a little bit about these indigenous cultures from pre-Columbian time. Another question here again for 6 to 12 could be the same. What does the word identity mean to you? And also thinking about one special thing that makes you unique, just as all these other elements made Kahlo's life and as a woman artist at that time important and special and unique about the artist. So beginning with the art making, students and are thinking about their own identity as they relate to mood boards and cork boards and maybe using even Pinterest. So this is the first step where students will research, gather personal pictures, objects, and even using social media or the app for Pinterest to collect their own collage as inspiration for their self-portrait. In this case, I created my own mood board about the things that are important to me as a woman. As I'm a mom, I have a drawing of my daughter, beautiful flowers that represent the part where I grew up in Quito, Ecuador, the beautiful fauna and the greens that I found. There's some stamps from Ecuador, an image of Picasso that represents a lot of the iconography that I was seeing when I was little, and obviously basing it as well for the composition using Frida Kahlo's portrait. You begin by prepping the paper. So you're going to take your dark color paper folded, almost like a hot dog. You're going to create an invisible line by folding papers in half. And then you're going to take your white pencil to begin the border, who will not only encapsulate the composition in the middle, but also will allow students to create different wonderful designs surrounding the border. The next few steps, you also want to use as a great link to the elements of art and principle of design. I adjusted this lesson for lower grades, but there's so many ways, like I mentioned before, using different mediums and different types of things, and depending on the level and the facial features and what your students might be capable or wanting to explore. But I used it just with basic elements of art, like creating a rectangle as a border, then this triangle that holds from the beginning of the bottom of the border, adding a U on the top, closing it on the top, and then adding everything in the middle. As we know, sometimes it's hard to think about our face and features, and very difficult to put it into a vertical composition. So this will help your students sort of create that. I don't necessarily love demos because I feel you give so much information or so much guidance as to students, but ask them to be creative in ways they could add their eyes and think about their nose and their mouth and their facial features. And again, linking it back to their identity. How do your eyes look? How does your nose look? What are your ears like, or your hair, etc. And then adding, like I mentioned before, your terms for elements of art or principles of design. What I did with mine is I always kept going back to my mood board, thinking about, the way my hair looks. I usually have it up on a ponytail, something that also signifies who I am and people know me for, my big eyebrows, thinking about my nose and my lips. I'm having my hair to the side, and I often wear stripes, just to kind of symbolize that. Then on the second portion, I will ask students to think about the symbols themselves. So staying, kind of moving from identity, the way I look and the way I see myself, to more linking it to things that are important to you, and those objects and foods and hobbies that you might want your students to incorporate. In my case, I added the beautiful pink flower that represents this particular place where I grew up in Ecuador, with some of these branches of all the walks I took in the forest, a drawing. I took the halo from my daughter's drawing that she had all the time, and also a rainbow that represents the beauty of my children and their whimsical life and world. And then a beautiful small parrot that's a little more realistic on the bottom, that it's a guacamaya that also related to my cultural heritage in Ecuador. So that would be the beginning on your composition. So we're thinking about identity, we're thinking about objects and symbolism, and all these things that you took from the mood board and created it only with a white pencil and the black cardboard or dark cardboard. Next, you're gonna ask them to think about the colors, right? What other symbols and a color palette that they might wanna begin working on. And then to finalize the activity around all the border, I added little things of just design, like the circles that symbolize a full life and these beautiful tropical leaves. I also added, thinking about the spacing and what the things and how they're placed, a watermelon, as I saw this shape created by my color, and that represents all the summers spent here in Florida, and how that it is also part of me, and thinking about the colors from my mood board, the way the parrot looks, and so forth. And that will be your completed activity. Hopefully students have fun creating and adding all these symbols. It could be so many other things. Another thing to also consider with this is the how to layer, right? We always I think about this as a collage, but think about layering and what are the things that are on the foreground, middle ground, and background of their compositions and the self-portrait, and then always relating it to Frida Kahlo, right? She's got these monkeys wrapped around her, and then this beautiful fauna in the back, the importance of that symbol in the front of her thing. So ask them to layer. To lower grades, it's a little difficult to kind of think and put things kind of floating, which could be also very interesting. But it would be also a good idea to link about like layering and what it means to layer things on a composition. Other ways that we could also extend your activity is by doing something afterwards, like discussing your portraits. I will say a great idea would be to lay them out, even actually work as how to lay them out in a gallery in the classroom, and then talk about not only their works of art, but also what other works of art might mean to them and the representation of those symbols within. Sometimes for students, it's hard to open up. So this could be a good opportunity to not only talk about their art and what they created and their identity, but also to see what they see in other works of art, right? Using, again, going back to those elements of art and those principles of design. For grades 6 to 12, there's so many ways you can make this a more um, um, full lesson in terms of how to add that literacy portion to it. And maybe students in the upper grade levels could create an essay or write a poem about their self-portrait, or even, who knows, swapping portraits and writing an essay or a poem based on their classmates' self-portraits. So these are a few ideas on how you can link a self-portrait created with oil pastels, which was not what Frida Kahlo used on her portrait, and how to extend it beyond just the art making to link it also to literacy and language arts in the classroom. So we hope that after you have created that, you can always go back to the vocabulary to talk about the many things and also keep those terms handy for, starting with identity, culture, surrealism, realism, and symbolism, also thinking about the grade levels in your classroom. We hope you have fun creating with your students and bringing a new lesson and new fun creative ideas about an artist like Frida Kahlo that is so well known and so recognized, and adding a new layer to what students see in front of them. We hope by reviewing the lesson that Meredith led through the See, Think, Wonder portion, and then creating this activity in your classroom might spark many other ideas on how to create a self-portrait and think about the themes of symbolism, Mexican modernism, cultural heritage, and identity in your classroom. You might find the complete art making lesson in PDF formats and the step-by-step directions by clicking on the link in the description below. We hope you enjoy the art making session with us, and we cannot wait to see your artwork in the classroom. Hopefully you can share that with us at schools@norton.org. Bye.
Thank you for participating in our Frida Kahlo lesson today. We hope you're as excited as we are for the upcoming exhibition, Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, and Mexican Modernism from the Jacques and Natasha Gelman collection opens on October 23rd, 2021. Just a reminder that we have free school tours, free virtual school tours, and free busing for Palm Beach County schools. If you're coming to the museum, you can also add an art making activity with our teaching artist in our studio, as well as lunch in our museum garden. So we really hope to see you this year. Can't wait to engage with you in your school. To book for the fall, you can book at norton.org/school starting on August 16th. We also have opportunities for you as educators. We'll probably actually have an opportunity for you to come to the Mexican Modernist exhibition this fall. So you can find out more about those opportunities at norton.org/educators, where we also have teacher resources such as lesson plans, resource lists, and our teaching posters, which are downloadable for you to print. At the end of our professional development sessions, we always like to have some time to reflect. So I actually learned this trick 3-2-1 from Samika Satterthwaite at the district, and I think it's just a really great way to end a session. Take a moment to jot down 3 words that describe your experience with this video today. Now, write down 2 ways you can utilize what you've learned with your students. So, what did you do today through this video that you can't wait to take back to your classroom? And 1, what is one thing that you learned that you thought was really surprising or interesting? Feel free to share your reflection with us at schools@norton.org or on our Instagram or Twitter at Norton Museum of Art. We love to hear what you thought about the session today and also how we can work with you. We're always open to new ideas about how to collaborate or what we can do better. Thank you.